My name is David, and this is my story. One of 8 children. I'm the oldest of 8 children. And that was interesting because my sister and I had a separate father. And I remember him years ago. Believe it or not, I was a baby, and I remember him rocking me and singing the Irish lullaby, Tooraloo. And the next thing I remember, it was probably about 5 or 6 years old, is my mom pushing him out the door. And I just remember that, I just didn't have any feelings about that other than I didn't think that he was going to be gone that long. Well, he was. And he had been unfaithful to her. So she set about raising my sister and I. And we moved into public housing, which was kind of a challenge, in Zanesville, Ohio. And my mom went to work, so I had a lot of sitters. And then she met my stepfather, and my experience with him was not as a father, but as a stepfather from hell. I mean, he was abusive. He was abusive to my mother. He was abusive to my sister. He sexually abused my sister. And when he had 5 more children, we adopted one, he abused them as well. The thing about it was, I didn't know what a father was supposed to be like. I had no upbringing, a good example of what a father was. So I wanted to be just like him. He was a womanizer. He was a tough guy. And I was a little skinny 110-pound kid that stood up to him one day and said this house wasn't big enough for both of us. And he proved me exactly right. He was, exactly wrong. And he took charge. I was terrified of him. But I used to have fantasies about going into his room at night when he was sleeping, when he was home, and running a butcher knife through him and killing him. And because I didn't like, the way he treated us and my mom, but thank God I didn't do that. I was terrified of him to begin with. I wouldn't have done it. I was growing up wanting to be like him, tough like him, a womanizer. He was a womanizer. So I had a hell of a time, with growing up, finding out who I was. It was a challenge. But I got to become a father too. And that wasn't good because I cheated. I sinned. I still tried to be a good father with my kids. And I still do. I'm still in their lives, my 2. And the third one that came along from another marriage. But I've never felt adequate, as a dad. But I've been fortunate because, especially since I've come to know Christ. A friend of mine, when I discipled me after I knew Christ, he said that he gave me a Myers-Briggs test, that determines your focus. And my focus at that time was I was very goal-oriented. I had people telling me what I can't do, what I couldn't do, and I was determined to prove them wrong. So I did a lot. I achieved. And unfortunately, it took me away from being the kind of father I should have been. And I was goal-oriented. I was in the Navy for 26 years. And I was gone a lot. But the good news is after I realized that this wasn't the way to go, it was totally unsuccessful. As from a personal perspective, I was achieving professionally, flying in the Navy. I seemed to do well in school. The Navy sent me to school, and I graduated pretty high up. And then I went to flight training in the Navy, and I succeeded at that. But I really wasn't successful at being a dad. And I really regret that part of my life. I mean, there was a lot of wasted years there. Deploying with the Navy and then divorcing. And after the divorce, trying to stay in the kids' lives. But I was gone a lot. But my kids never gave up on me. In fact, my kids became Christian before I did. And my daughter and son, continue to pray for me. I was going through a pretty serious divorce with my third son's mom, pretty bad. And so I decided I was going to go try to keep this alive. I was really hurting, with having a son, a new son, and a wife that I just couldn't figure out at all. And the sad truth is, I went to church just to be with them, just to go where they were going. And I think what was cool about that was God's work. He said, I'm going to get you here one way or the other. I got asked a question at a men's group meeting, and hey, Dave, how many times have you heard the gospel message? And I said, well, I probably, heard it a lot of times in sermons. I said, I heard it one time. And I said, when I heard it, I understood it. I believed it. And so my goal at the time was to figure out what was going on wrong with me and my family. And this guy I met at church said, I can fix that. I can help you. I can help you get your family back. So I went there and eventually went to a men's group one night, and I had an experience. It was not an experience where somebody came to me and prayed with me, but I was in such a depressed state because I was losing my family. Again, I just had this thing going on where I just didn't feel like there was any hope. And one night I just got down by my bed and I said, I'd been to a couple of church meetings and this group meeting I was going to, and I just prayed the prayer, I need you, Lord. I just can't do this by myself. And I just felt a peace. My ex-wife was moving in, had stayed in the house, kicked me out, and her brother was moving in there, and I was really upset about that. But there was a peace that just came over me that said, let that go. Just let it go. I got this. So I went to the next group. The guy's name was Rick French up in Jacksonville. And we went into a room, men in one room, women in the other. And he says, okay, who wants to pray us in? I said, I'll do it. He said, what? I said, I'll do it. So I prayed it, and I said, at the time, it was a funny prayer because I said, I just hope I can live up to this. And he said, don't worry, Dave, you can't. And he was absolutely right. But that was my kind of experience, with recovery from this problem of very low self-esteem. The big thing I need is affirmation, and I'm a touchy guy. Touchy and affirmation are big. Never had any affirmation my whole life. After that conversion experience, I really tried to get back, brought the wife back, brought the son back who moved out. And then this good friend, Rick French, kind of was discipling me. And I went away to a education conference, came home, and my house was empty again. She took all the furniture, moved out. And the guy that discipled me helped her. And I couldn't believe it, because this guy knew me. He knew that I wasn't capable of being the person she said I was. But, what am I going to do? The good thing about it was I didn't quit. So I was hurt. I was hurt by the church and hurt by my friend. And I just dug my heels in. I said, this can't be the Father that I've come to know, the Father that I never had. And I just don't believe that he wants that for me. The first hurt was my father leaving. That was just, I couldn't believe he was. And then, of course, when I got the stepfather, that was a challenge. And but it hurt because there was that abandonment. I used to make up the awfulest stories about my father being gone, that he was killed in the war. I remember going to a friend's house and saying, my father's not here, but he was killed in the war. I mean, I told lies, to cover up the truth. And the truth was, I didn't understand why he was gone, or what he had done. I found out later that he had a family, same age sister, a brother my age, another external family. So that was challenging. And that rejection, was part of who I was at the time. And then I got this mean old stepfather, and he was tough. I did have a grandmother and grandfather that were awesome. My grandmother would come and get us. She knew we were abused. She'd take us over to her place once in a while and treat us really well. But my grandmother was an alcoholic. And my grandfather was Hungarian Jew. And she used to call him everything but a person. And they'd get into battles because she would get drunk and he wouldn't tolerate it. And that would happen in front of us. So that was sad. That was a hurtful thing, too. Hurts, for me, were motivators, I think, more than anything. So the hurt translated itself into me getting better and stronger. I wasn't going to sit and feel sorry for myself. But the problem was it translated into me being God. The lies were that, I'd never measure up. So that resulted in bad behavior because I was doing everything to be better than he was. I was trying to be a tough guy. I went through a lot of girlfriends, a lot of women in my life. My mother, of all things, always thought he was perfect. He was the biggest jerk that ever lived, but she always defended him. And she did until the day she died. She was 90 years old. She denied the assaults on the children. She denied that he was abusive. She just said he was a good dad because he came in and took my sister and I under his wing and tried to raise us. And I give him credit for that. The lie was, to me, that was the way to do things. That was something I would stimulate. And it wasn't. Didn't work in my personal life, divorces, kids, struggles, And even in the Navy, I had personal issues with authority and things, but survived it. And I just was headed in the wrong direction because I was my God, I overcame those problems. I thought, anyway. Of course, they manifest themselves in my own relationships later. So when I found out, that there was a different way, that there was a different Father, that there was a different example to follow, trying to be like Christ, I was more determined to be like the Christ I saw in my mind. It's kind of weird. But, I was driven to be the best Christian I knew how when I became a Christian. I was involved in everything. I was involved in ministry. I was involved in small group worship. We had worship at our homes and all that. So it was still an object-oriented thing. It wasn't a receiving of the peace and love that I felt I didn't deserve. I was trying to do the works. I think that was the big realization that I had abandoned my family when I was young, my two children, for another woman. And one thing that changed in me when I was being this goal-oriented Christian, I decided that I had to ask forgiveness of my ex-wife. And so I flew out to California. My son was in a drunken marijuana stupor in an apartment at the time, my Chris. And so I flew out to California and I met with Carol, his mother. And she was Christian. And I apparently been praying for me a long time, but I was crushed, for the way I treated her and treated my kids. So I begged for forgiveness. And she said, already done. Already given, long time ago. And my daughter was one who has continued to show her dad unconditional love. My son's a little more conditional, my preacher son. But he eventually saw me as a changed person. And that's when I began to realize that I was changing, that I was attempting to build more relationship than I was just accomplishments. He came away from California, came back home with me, stayed with me for a while, and ended up going to seminary school. So he's a preacher now in Nebraska. He's been out there a number of years. Strangely, he attributes, his conversion to me, seeing the change in me, which I thought was amazing because I didn't even see the change in me. But he did. I praise God for that. That's something I didn't deserve on my own, for sure. And my daughter's just been unconditionally loving, but I'm still praying for the young one. And I'm praying somebody comes into his life and, if it's not me, that he comes to find out, that there is a good father. And I'd love to have a relationship with him again. Nancy and I fell from grace with him when he got married because he thought we were trying to kill his marriage. And then he got divorced 5 years later, and still haven't heard from him. The gospel, I have had two experiences in my life of what I've, from people, not just the unconditional love of God, but this unconditional forgiveness from my ex-wife was really big. The unconditional love of my daughter, who has seen me go through multiple marriages and multiple sinful living and ego and, the things that I did that were totally wrong. She's never shown me anything but love. And that's unconditional. We think we have to be perfect, or we have to do works, or we have to do things to receive God's love. And that the love that we give back, is just simply obedience. I could be totally wrong about that, but if I'm obeying God's will for my life, that's giving him back the love that he gives us. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me was one that I love because it, but for the wrong reasons, at the time when I was goal-oriented, it meant tackle everything you can do it, but when I found out the true meaning of that, that I can endure all things because he strengthens me. And the things that I've done wrong and things I'm doing right, but the things I'm challenged with, I can ask him, I can call on him to give me the strength that I need to endure those things. We used to have a group in our home that was a family life, divorce recovery kind of beat with a bunch of couples because they were struggling, they were struggling with their careers. And I used to have coffee with a couple of guys and try to talk to them about, you need to trust him, not yourself, not to get involved with the supervisors or the goal. Trust him, pray about it, let him come and guide you. Let the Holy Spirit give you direction, and I don't know whether a bunch of the couples, we lost one couple in that group, but a bunch of the couples' marriages are still intact. The great thing is when you get to see the work done when you're not doing it, that's the real blessing. You see God at work, and wow, that's something only God could do. I've learned that I got to take what I can get, but I got to keep giving everything. God is good. I mean, I've got a great family, wonderful 17 grandkids, 2 great grandkids. And as undeserving as I am, I really feel blessed, that God didn't give up on me. Nana is absolutely my soulmate. She is the most amazing, loving, relationship-oriented woman I've ever met in my life. And I'm really super blessed to love her, and I love her with all of the heart that God has given me.